Okay, this is Mike Chappell from the Lakefield Historical Society. We're capturing memories of people and residents of long-term residents of Lakefield. And today we're talking with Jack Millage, who's been with the in the village here for a long time. So, Jack, could you tell us when you first came to Lakefield? Were you born here?
I was born here, yeah. I was born up in, do you remember Mark Short, her house? That's where I was born,
And what year was that?
1926.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And what was Lakefield like then?
Well, it was run mainly by the Smithworks. That was the main employer at that time. And our front lawn every morning would be covered with white dust, yay thick. And so my father eventually laid charges against this network. They built a high tower that still stands, and then they gave him the job of building a dust collecting system. Yeah. And then about three, 2.5, 3 years later, we moved down on Water Street.
Okay, right at the bend there. Near the dam?
No, not that far down. If you go down Reed Street and turn right, it would be on the third house along there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that time, what was Lakefield like as far as services? Was it water or plumbing or?
No, no. Uh, my father, being a plumber, had put some plumbing in our place when we moved in there. Um, he put the original plumbing in the old public school, and before the war, he hired a lot of boys of army age to dig all the trenches for the septic system. And bet you guys could find that septic tank today. It's probably still in the ground up there
So
where
you,
the school used to be.
so you were probably one of the first houses to have indoor plumbing then.
Yeah, one of one of the few. Yeah, it was mainly outhouses for quite a few years. Yeah.
When did they put the water system in town?
No, I can't remember. I remember Bill Grant was the reeve at that time. Uh, and everybody thought it would sink the town to do it, but they went ahead with it anyway, and of course it's been a blessing. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. We didn't have any as kids. We didn't have any more polyhouses to push over at Halloween. They were all gone.
So was the old school that place when you went to school?
Yeah. Hmm.
So they were talking about one up on Tuner Street.
Yeah.
And what was it like going to school then?
Uh, well, it was kind of a public high school altogether. Um, And we were just, as kids, we used to get into government just like anybody else and whatnot. My memories of that are more of Mr. Harvey, who was the principal at the high school part of it. And he was quite a gentleman, very strict, I guess you would say. If he caught you running in the hall, he'd grab you by the scruff of the neck and lift you off your feet and whatnot.
And I guess in those days the strap was probably something that people
Oh,
were still
yeah,
getting.
yes, that's right. The teachers got away with a lot more than they can now, but they certainly gave the strap quite often. You went to the principal's office or whatnot and got your waxes sometimes in front of all the students. You got your wax.
I know when I went to school, they used to have pointers sometimes that they would wrap on your
Oh,
fingertips.
yeah. I've known teachers that threw chalk brushes and various other things.
Yeah.
I was born left-handed, and that was, in those days, that was a no-no. And my teachers would knock me over the fingers when I catch me writing with my left. And so now I'm right-handed in some ways and I'm left-handed in other ways. So I eat with my left and throw a ball with my right. And
Well, that's incredible compared to what they would do today.
yeah,
But the good news is science tells us that if you use both hands, it keeps your memory sharp as you age.
Well, maybe that's so, I don't know.
So he may have had a subtle
Yeah,
advantage from that, although it was hard to do at
the
the
only
time.
thing it left me with is I have to think when somebody says, give me your right hand, I have to think which hand do they want, just for a split second. Whether that's old age or whatnot, I don't know.
Sometimes my wife has to do that, and she's got several years both of you.
I can't tell.
Yeah.
So, what teacher would you remember the most during your time in school?
Mrs. Kennedy was the one who used to snap my fingers, and she would teach us to write properly, which some of the kids nowadays can't.
So, what grade would that be?
Uh, yeah, I don't know. Miss Kidd, of course, was our kindergarten teacher, and I skipped the school for a year in school on that. Miss Medill, I believe it was, and then I got some sunstrokes and lost a year, so I was back where I started from.
How'd you get the sunstroke?
Laying on the sun as a kid, we had a place up on Clear Lake, my cottage. We lived in a tent for quite a while, and we'd go out swimming, and then we'd come back and lay in the sun. Sometimes we'd fall asleep. You get too much sun, and then you'd really be sick. I had terrible fevers for a year.
Wow.
They said, "Oh, you're going to die if you get another one." And I turned around next year and got another one, and I still lived through it. So
That's quite something. I've never had it that bad, although I have had sunstroke occasionally.
yeah.
So, what do you remember most about it as a boy growing up in town?
Well, as I remember, I wanted to have a paperweight, and a fellow by the name of Gerald Stabler had the franchise for the Examiner in Lakefield, so he controlled all the papers, and he would divide the route out to each person. And winter or summer, my area was up by the cement works and up the cement works hill and whatnot at that time. And, it was big money in those days, but probably only $1 or so a week. And then the Bell boys who lived over on Charlotte Street, they wanted to get rid of the Star Weekly, which was a colored magazine or paper. And so he said he had 50 customers, and I bought the thing off from him. My mother bought me a bicycle, and I was going to pay her back with all this huge profit. As it turned out, he didn't have any customers because he was so unreliable that everybody quit him. And I got all these papers delivered, had to pay for them, and no customers. But I eventually won them all back, and I think I paid for my bicycle. I wouldn't swear to it. Yeah.
How much would it cost in those days?
Oh, probably $15.
When you were growing up, who are people in town that you would remember, like people that stood out that made a difference in town?
Oh, I remember, a lot of the businessmen like Doug Davis, who had service station just up the street, Elwood Northey, who ran the drugstore, the doctors Fraser, both father and son, and Earl Edwards, the barber, or Barney Edwards, as they call it. Yeah. And,
Were people at that time still driving only cars, or was it still horse traffic in Lakeville?
Well, when my father first started, he had to rent a horse and buggy when he went out to the country. So if he was going out, say, to eavesdrop or put in a furnace, he would rent a horse and buggy, and then he'd stay at the farmhouse until he finished the job, as long as he brought everything with him. And then we get a horse and buggy to take him back to town again. And that was quite common. In fact, even when I started, we weren't doing horse and buggies, but we were still staying at farms quite often when we put in a furnace and something, take 2 or 3 days. Yeah,
What was your father's name?
Edwin Joseph Millage.
And where would he rent a horse and buggy from in Lakefield?
Um, I don't know where the stables were. I don't remember. I remember just a couple of doors down Reed Street, there was a Jack Hendron who had horses and whatnot. Uh, but I don't think he ever rented any of them. He took wood and whatnot to various places, winter and summer and whatnot. So I don't know. And I remember the United Church over here had barns for horse and buggies and whatnot. And I can remember some of the families coming from the country in their buggies to go to church.
So it must have been behind where the church is now.
Eh?
Must have been behind where the church is now.
Off to the one side, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of course, it's been a big addition for us those days, yeah.
Was there electrical power in Lakefield then?
Um, you know, I'd have to say yes. I believe, yeah, I'd say yes, it was, yeah. Yeah.
So the generating plant would have already been built.
You know where we got our power from, but the plant down at the river was there, yeah.
Who were your neighborhood friends when you were a boy?
My wife, some with the Hill family, Clare Hill, Stafford Hill, uh, Jim Tully, Greg Knox. Yeah, memories going on. Anyway, yeah, quite a bunch of mixture of boys. Yeah, it was a lot
So-
of fun. I did lots of devilment and whatnot.
So Knox was one related to the one that was principal in Brooklyn?
That was which.
That was principal in the school?
It could be. There was Herb Knox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Herb.
Yeah. Yeah.
So were you in any clubs or sports when you were a boy?
Well, I pitched hardball. I played rugby. I played hockey. I played hockey with. They had original hockey team was Peterborough was Lakefield. Peterborough didn't have much of a hockey team when Monty Chappell and those were around, and Chittick, Bob Chittick and whatnot, Joe Blewett. And then when the war came, um, the hockey disappeared, but the Legionnaires still kept the team going. And but we couldn't be junior A because we were too small a town. So I guess we were B or something like that. But I played right wing with Red Sullivan. He eventually went on to play for the New York Rangers.
Yeah, I remember him. Very famous hockey player.
Yeah, he used to spend all day at the rink. He didn't go to school. So I come home from school loaded with books, and I used them for thin pads because I didn't have money to buy thin pads. And teachers thought, gee, he's taking a lot of books home. Must be studying hard.
So when you say you played rugby, was there a team in town then?
Oh yeah, yeah. We had it was a very good team. It was rough and tumble hockey. We used to go play in Lindsay and various other places. We would hire a bus and go from place to place. Yeah, Lindsay was a rough place. The ladies would stick their purse out. If you had your head down when you were along the board, you got wham right in the face. Yeah, and quite often they, even in Lakefield, they had to call the police in to get the referee out the door because fans would get so excited about just a hockey game, you know.
Yeah, I've read stories like that, but it's more cool by the time I was involved.
Yeah.
So in the summer, you did you played rugby. What else did you do?
Well, of course, I when we had the cottage and the tent and whatnot, we would go up there, and my father would be able to come up on the weekends. And of course, like all boys, my brother and I had to think of something to keep ourselves out of mischief. So we found that if we turned a canoe upside down, you could dive under it and come up and breathe the air for a while. And that was it. Well, that wore off after a while. Then my father sold galvanized pails, plumbing business, and just Kingston. And so we just snitch a few pails, put a rock on the top, tie it with a rope, and put the pail on our head and walk out as far as we could. But of course, then you run out of air and you dump the pail. Well, now you can't dive down too far, so you had to get another pail. Well, pretty soon he discovered that he wasn't making any money for the pails were going. So he put a stop to that. So we went up to Doug Davis's garage here, and they had a big oil can about, I don't know, maybe 14, 15 inches by about 6 inches, and we washed it out and cut grooves in it for our shoulder and got a hose and flipped the hose over the curve so it fit on our head and got some lead from the plumbing shop, and now we could go out quite a piece. So that wore off, so we decided we had to see where we were going. So we put a glass in the front of the thing with putty and whatnot, and if you go quite a distance and see where you're going. And we had a string on it with a wooden piece of wood on it, so we could find it and pull it up again. Then I don't know whether I got the bright idea or my brother, but we decided we put an air hose or a garden hose from the top up through a piece of wood, and then we could breathe all the time. Well, that was the dumbest idea ever, because the minute we stepped in too deep, the whole can filled full of water and all the air was gone, almost drowned us. So my father found out about that, and the can ended up in the middle of Clear Lake, and that ended that.
Sounds like fun times. Did you do other sorts of things in the summer? What did they have swimming here in town?
Was there what?
Was there swimming lessons in town?
Well, no, not that early, but we had. I remember when the last log run came through Lakefield, and it just jam packed. I don't know what year that would be. I would think maybe it was 2029 or something, 1929. And they built piers, cement piers all along, and they tie a boom between them to keep the logs out of the boat navigation. So my father would take us down with the strap on us by the waterfront and hold us there while we paddled like mad going nowhere. And then when he felt it was safe, he'd take us out to one of the piers, take the boat away and say, okay, now swim back. That's how we learned to swim.
How far would it have been?
Oh, I don't know, 100 feet or
So back there.
not very far.
Well, it's quite a lot when you're first learning to swim.
Well, yes, yeah, but that was the way, that's how we all learned to swim. And we had to, because we were living right on the water at that time, so, yeah, it was sink or swim.
Yeah, the current's quite strong down there too. It's quite yeah, it's great. Yeah. So you would have been, of course, alive during the time when steamboats were popular.
Yeah, my grandfather was the captain on many of the steamboats that went through this area. Yeah.
And he worked for Stony Lake Navigation?
Yeah.
Did you ever go out on the boats with him?
Not with him, no. I went on the various Stony Lake and Islinda and whatnot would have church picnics and so on. So we would go out on those picnics, but that's the only time. I never went came on any boat.
So the next Sunday school picnics, did you were you active in the church here?
Yes, I was at one time. I must confess, not so active now, but yes, I was on the board and various other positions on the board. Yeah,
And which church was that?
United Church. Very great.
What do you remember about the old time church activities compared to now?
Well, of course, there was a lot of activity. We had a preacher that I most remember, Reverend Kelly. He had a family of, I think, three girls or so and one boy. But he was very active, and so was his wife in organizing plays and whatnot. And the Sunday school was very active. We had Christmas concerts, and you get a bag of fruit or whatnot, so on. It was a very, very active church when he was. Yeah.
Yeah, minister can be so much in the church. Somebody told me that one time there used to be a horse would come to the church and on certain days. Were you there when that would that happen?
What? Kurt?
A horse?
Oh, yeah, yeah. The Hunter family, Bob Hunter and Al Hunter, their father and mother, they used to come in from the country every Sunday and park in the barn there, horse and buggy all the time.
So what do you get groceries in town at that time?
Well, they had the Spence's store, which is more or less a vacant building now, and right across the street where the pantry is, this Porter's store. And they used to deliver bread and butter and all sorts of things door to door. Um, you could go in there and you could buy a cent's worth of mixture, which was a bag of hard candy for a penny. And if you were lucky, you might even get a prize all that for the same penny. And they kept great big barrels on the floor, just full of hard candy.
I remember Spencer's didn't they have a big grate in the floor that they used for heating. You had to walk on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Remember as a kid thinking I'd fall through the grate. It was sort of a
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I worked. I worked on T.C. Young. Just across the street here. I worked as a delivery boy for him after school and on Saturday night was open night day. I got a job at Erskine Hardware where the Royal Bank is now, and they had a hardware and a combination radio repair. So by the name of Fothergill, ran the radio repair and looked after the hardware. And with Erskine, he was a traveling salesman, so he was rarely here. And I watched Vic Fothergill light the stove in the morning, and he would pour kerosene. There's a 45-gallon drum of kerosene in the back. He'd get a cupful, pour it in, and I'd get the fire going in a hurry. Boy, that's smart. So one day I had to come in for a while on the noon hour, and the fire was out, but there were lots of coal, so I filled it up full of wood. Of course, nothing happened, so I get out and I got a pint of kerosene, poured it in. Nothing happened. Out and got a bit more kerosene, poured it in, and the stove had a center lid on it. And I lifted that lid and looked in, and just as I did, boom! My hair was on fire, my eyelashes were gone, the skin all came off my face, blew all the pipes down, which went about 25 feet down the store, blew the stove all to pieces. And luckily, a friend of mine, Dave Spence from the Spence's store, he came in and put the fire out in my head, but I didn't have much hair left and whatnot. So I learned that yes, it's good on a cold fire, but never do it on a hot fire. And they decided they could do without my services after that.
Did you have to go to the doctor after that?
Oh yes, I went to the doctor. Yeah, yeah. I had two of those trips. I had a furnace blow up in my face. Over at Elwood Northern Drugstore, he had a hanging furnace, and he had a habit of there was a safety switch to cut it out, and he had a habit come along with the broom handle and kick it. And it pumped a little oil, maybe it started, maybe it didn't. So this morning, day before Christmas, I hadn't done any Christmas shopping, and he called me at 8 o'clock and said the furnace won't go. So I old Doc Fraser came down every morning to Elwood store and they had a coffee or whatever. And so I climbed up the ladder and Doc was right at the bottom of the ladder and I started it and it started. And then I realized by the roar and it was shaking that it was flooded. So I dropped the door, which is only about that big, about 4 inches, and waited, and I thought it quit, so I lifted the lid and boom, and it just wrapped me in flames.
Oh,
Threw
God.
me off the ladder. I hit poor Doc on the way down, and he yelled at Elwood to get some spray, and they sprayed me all over. I went to, I think it was the read. He wrapped me up just like a mummy. All I had was just two holes for my eyes, and I had to go do my Christmas shopping looking like that. What a mess. But I was fine, except uh, Christmas Eve about 10 o'clock, I went into shock. And my poor wife had 4 kids to get everything wrapped and ready for Christmas, and here I was, this raving lunatic. Yeah. So, anyway,
And so did you have to go to the hospital when you went in shock or?
no, no, I fought it out, and when they took off the bandages, all the old dead skin came off, and I never had a scar.
You were sending me a message, I can't see it.
How old and what year?
Oh, what year did that happen?
Oh boy, I'm not good at years.
Well, it was Doc Reed, so it had to be in at least the late 50s.
Well, I'd be, hmm, no, no, I'll have to work on that one.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody's memory is perfect. So you were here during the war years.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly, I don't know whether you served or not, but what was it like during?
Well, we really didn't suffer that much, you know, everything was pretty well available. You were supposed to have gas rationing, we were supposed to have this and that, but we had 2 or 3 trucks at that time. So they gave you, when you ran out of one book of tricks, they gave you another book. And other than that, there was really it was really no big deal for us. We were lucky. I joined the Prince of Wales Rangers. The first group of Prince of Wales Rangers in Peterborough went active. And then they got a bunch of kids like myself to join up, and we were trained at the Peterborough Armories and whatnot, and taught to do this and that and the other thing. And we had a bunch of lawyers that were officers and whatnot who couldn't ski, and yet we go water skiing, or at least snow skiing. And they would end up riding in a Jeep or in the Bren gun carrier or whatnot. And they gave us all kinds of ammunition that had been saved from the First World War, and we would shoot it off in the gun range and whatnot because it wasn't safe, wasn't dependable enough to give back to the Army.
So when you're talking about the gun range, you mean the one that's in the armories, or was there another gun range?
No, it was in the range for the Army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would have been what, a 303 ammunition?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how was it here when the war finally ended and people started coming home?
Well, you know, to a young lad, it didn't seem to mean that much. Like it didn't change that many things. I know a lot of wives and a lot of guys were really happy to get home, but you know, for life for the young ones just went on as normal. Yeah.
So let's go back and find out when you finished school. That was what, grade 8, grade 10,
Yeah, great, yeah.
grade 10. What was your first job out of school
Well, I
other than your delivery job?
yeah, to get out of taking the French and Latin, I my father wanted me to take a business course, so I traded from Lakefield School to Peterborough Collegiate. And I took a business course there, learned to type, which is the best thing I ever did. And I didn't have to take French or Latin, which I don't know how to use. And I played basketball there and rugby there. Then during the wartime, this is kind of cutting back. During the war, you could get out of school early if you took a war job. And my father said, well, you couldn't get a job anywhere anyway because you can't do anything. And I thought, well, I'll prove you wrong. So I went down to GE, but they weren't hiring. And then I went to Outward Marine and they were taking summer food. So I worked in Outward in the assembly line. And that's where I met my wife too. She worked in the inspection department at Outboard Marine. And we became quite good friends and eventually got married.
And what year would that be when you got married?
I'd have to go look at my wedding certificate.
I have to think what my wife asked me to. Right?
Yeah, there again, the dates are my dates and names are my weak point.
Yeah.
And my father was the same. He had a saying, I will never forget Mr. What's his name. That's me.
I know. When you call everybody buddy, then they don't know.
I never forget a face, but I can't remember name. If you told me your name 5 minutes ago, I wouldn't remember it now, but I would never forget if I saw you on the street.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm not as good with either, so you got one up on me.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, you got married. You
Yeah.
had some children.
4 of them. Yeah, twin girls and 2 boys. Yeah.
Okay, so your children are, their names are?
Oh, the girls are Vidra and Vela, and the boys are Craig and Gordon.
And how long were you married?
Well, to my wife died, which is 45 years or so. Yeah.
Successful and happy times.
Beg pardon?
Successful and happy times.
Yeah.
What do you remember most about raising kids, your children in Lakefield?
Well, the girls were great. They were never any trouble. My youngest boy, as long as you gave him something to do or build it for him, he was no trouble. My oldest boy, he went through the Beatles stage and the long hair, which wasn't too popular then. And he was also had this attitude, you know, you're not going to tell me anything because I already know it. And so we actually booted him out at one time, and then of course found out some days later that he was sneaking into the basement and sleeping there anyway. I don't know if he was getting his food, but he was sneaking in. And eventually, you know, it all settled out, and we did straighten out. He's a pretty good boy now. He's a teacher, yeah, or was.
Great. So when did you first start driving a car? Did you need a license then, or did you just start driving?
Oh yeah, no, I can remember well. I always wanted to go in my dad's car, but that wouldn't do. So I I bought myself a Model T, and Keith Brown, Keith Brown ran beauty parlor down in this building that time. And we went up to Ashley, and I think I paid $50 for a Model T uh, there. And it hadn't been run for ages. We put a bit of gas in it, and then proceeded to. He had a car, and he tried to push me home from that. And it was getting dark. I remember um, I put it in gear in one of the hills going down to see if I get the engine started, and the engine started, and the lights come on, and then blew out in the dark, and there I am going at a tremendous speed, probably at 30 miles an hour, and don't know where the heck I am. Anyway, we got us home, we burned all the wire, and I painted it white with red fenders. And that was the greatest, it never let me down. My wife and I, or she was my wife then, she lived, her family home was in Omimi. And we would go winter and summer to Omimi, and some of the hills she could get out and walk as fast as I could climb it. But nevertheless, it never failed me.
How long did you have it?
I guess about perhaps 4 years. I took it to the fairgrounds in Peterborough, and we were going to have a Model T race. But to keep the tremendous speeds of 30 mile an hour down, they made you stop, and your passenger had to run around the rear and get back in again and get going. Unfortunately, I wasn't a good enough mechanic to know what happened. All of a sudden, it wouldn't move. And I took it to a garage, and I know they just couldn't care less about a Model T, so they said junk it. So I put a new engine in it, which I think I paid $10 for. It still wouldn't move. Well, if I'd been smart, I'd have realized that the back end drive gear and the rear end had stripped. One of the washers had broken, and it shifted, so the drive shaft was going, but the rear end was moving. That's all was ever wrong with it. So I'm so disappointed. I fixed it and I sold it. I think I got $75 for it or something like that.
You made money.
Yeah, made money on the deal.
When you were a teenager in Lakefield, where did the kids hang out? What did they do?
Well, I don't know. You know, we bummed around looking at all the girls and whatnot, I suppose.
Yeah, I did
my
that too.
friend or I had a car, and it was Clare Hill. Yeah, had a car. We had a Ford Model B coupe. You know, we used to drive up and down the street and whatnot. And of course, Halloween, some of the things we did at Halloween were just not really the best, but we didn't hurt anybody, but we would do things that wreck things in a way that or move, displace them, I guess you'd call it. Like we take a farm wagon from the old blacksmith shop and jam it between the doors of the public school, you know, things like that. And then they have, so they invented a thing where um, they were going to have a party and you had to come reasonably dressed. That way they figured you wouldn't get into any trouble. So at the time, down the street, a fellow by the name of Charlie Tanner had a drugstore. And up on the very top of the cement block building was the words Tanner all in yellow leather. So I got the bright idea of making a Y and making a tannery, and I made hooks for it and everything. There were some old homemade ladders along the side of the building, so we knew that we could climb right up, or I could climb up and hang the leather on. And I remember my mother had just got me a blue pinstripe suit. And you got two pair of pants in those days when you had with cuffs and whatnot. And I had one of the pair of pants and jacket on. And I started up the ladder. I got about 3/4 of the way up, and the bloody ladder broke. Down I came. One side of the ladder went up my leg, just tore the pants wide open, and down I came. That was as far as we got with our Y on the.
That was the last we heard of that.
Yeah. And of course, I had to explain to mother, how did you rip your pants? Yeah. So anyway, I went to the second pair of pants on this Clare Hill. I had this Model B. He smoked, I didn't. And he flipped a cigarette out across in front of me out the window. So he said, and I said, I don't think that went out. Yes, it did. Said it went out. Don't worry about it. Well, in those days, to be really hip, you took your tie and made a belt out of it. Then you rolled up your pants in the dural roll, we call it, 3 or 4 rolls, the more the merrier. When I got home and unrolled my pants, there was a hole, there's a hole, there's a hole. It burned all the way through every layer of my pants. Another pair of pants got. So that's the sort of stuff we get into.
Did they have regular dances and things?
Well, we had the pavilion.
That's
I
behind the
remember-
old Lakefield.
Yeah, behind the Lakefield Hotel, and it was very popular. That's where I learned to dance. There was a girl called Lillian Calbury. The Calbury family lived there, and she taught I don't know how many boys of my age how to dance. And there was a lot of extra girls around because all the husbands, that was wartime, so all their husbands were away and they used to dance with each other in the pavilion. They had some pretty good bands there. And anyway, that was our usual hangout.
When you celebrated Christmas back then, I'm sure it was toned down compared to what it is today. But what would Christmas be like for you growing up?
Well, we would get a lot of little things, like we get all sorts of packages, but there'd be a comb and a brush and, nothing big.
No.
You might get one toy when you were younger, but after that was clothes and whatnot. Some of your aunts or uncles would send you something too, usually clothes or something, yeah.
So practical things.
Practical, yeah.
Where was your first home in Lakefield?
The first home,
Yeah.
Mark Short's home up on that street.
Struggle with the name.
Anyway,
I think it's Strickland. Yeah.
yeah, that was, I lived there till I was about 3. I can remember 2 things about that. We had a German family next door to us, the Gretschners. And they were having it pretty bad because I think either the war had started or there was ill feeling about Germans anyway. And Mrs. Gretschner had a party. She had a couple of boys, and she invited me over to the party, and they had a cake, and he cut the cake. And there was money inside some of the slices wrapped in white paper and whatnot. But the funny thing was, after the party was over, she took all the money back because that was just the fun of getting it. I remember that. That really stuck in my mind that that would happen. So that's how tight money was.
Unusual name. Do you have any other interesting or funny stories to remember about growing up and being in Lakefield?
I'm sure there are a lot of them. A lot of the adventures we get into. Mr. Norris, Fred Norris, had a lumber yard up where Hershey Stewart subdivision was. And he retired, but he kept some buildings there. And Keith Brown and I decided we'd build a motorboat there. And we slaved in that all winter long and whatnot. I think he gave it to us for free. He's that kind of guy. And we never, I don't know whether Keith completed it, but I gave up on it. And Keith moved to Apsley for a while and he took the boat there, and that's the last I saw of it. You know, really can't think of anything spectacular. I remember when I was married, I made the first television set in Lakefield. There wasn't any television station
Yeah.
to receive it, but I made it out of pieces. I had no case for it. Eventually, I built it into the wall in my basement. And we sold the first television sets before Ron Hall came to Lakefield, and then we quit. But we sold Fairbanks Morris, which was really an admiral.
Yeah, I remember them.
Yeah. And I repaired all kinds of them as a hobby. I also took up amateur radio, which I've been a ham for 75 years, I guess, anyway. And I'm not as active as they used to be. I
Yeah,
got
but you still do it?
a bit.
Yep.
Not much. I'm into 3D printing right now. I have a few 3D printers I forward on the go. I made a lot of shields for people, gave them away over 300 until they went over to mass. So I made things for doctors. I made things for senior citizens, for my great grandchildren, all sorts of. Yeah, keeps my mind going.
Yeah, I'm amazed. It's 3D printing is still cutting edge technology.
But if you get four of them going at once, all printing something else, I tell you, that's a great mind exercise. Yeah.
So you've been really in Lakeville for almost 100 years, really.
That's right.
And what's the biggest difference now with Lakefield today and compared to what it was when you were young?
Well, of course, it's getting bigger and bigger. That's one thing for sure. I don't notice that much difference downtown here. I noticed in my last few years in business, I can remember at one time, my father would say, if someone comes in and wants to buy a furnace or a plumbing job, you don't ask them if they're going to pay for it because you know they got the money or they wouldn't come in. By the time I retired, they might not have a dime, but they got a big idea and then they want you to worry about how you're going to get the money. So that kind of changed. It wasn't a case of a handshake anymore. You got to write it down or else. Yeah.
Yeah, that's different. I think myself, I see more people from the big city have moved here to Lakefield, so the population is different. Yeah, I remember as a kid, we knew everybody in town.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah. No, I never, every dog and cat, every person, I knew every license plate. So when you're hitchhiking, you know who'd give you a ride and who didn't give you a ride. You knew all those things. I can walk down the street now and not know a soul. So that's the difference.
That's the difference. The world has changed.
Yes, Pat.
What was your wife's maiden name?
Beg pardon?
What was your wife's maiden name?
Rolling,
Rolene?
Rolling. Rolling Endicott.
Endicott, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess unless there's something else you want to say for the future generations, Jack, we can pretty well wrap it up.
No. I think back how much the Main Street has changed. There used to be a Chinese restaurant here.
Yep.
The Wongs, I come with the Wolf Hastings and George Wong as a kid. We used to go over to the marsh and catch a snapping turtle. We got a quarter for a snapping turtle. That was big money. And he made soup out of it.
I remember when the big snapping turtles were big, this big at one time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, at least, would fit in our wagon, we flip them upside down and away we go.
So where the Wongs, where the new food haven is now?
No, they were back where Holland's store was.
Okay.
By the hardware, yeah.
So a lot of things have changed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. There's a newspaper there, which was run by Red Path, and then which Baker, I believe, or chap was. I used to go down and to help him pour the lead and make set up the letters and whatnot, which you could get good at. It was all backwards when you set it up, but printed the right way.
Yeah, very time consuming.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my father wanted to buy the building, and Mr. Baker wanted to sell it, but he wanted more than $1,900 for it, and Dad would not pay that much money for it. That shows you what happened to property value. Try and buy it for 1,900 now.
You kind of rent it for 1900. So what were house prices when you first bought a house?
Well, I built my first house. I don't know really how much it cost at the time. My father had some property and they built the house on Charlotte Street. And my father and brother and myself poured the foundation and whatnot. Then I got a carpenter from Omimi to come and do some framing, and then I did some work and whatnot. With a little bit of this and a little bit of that, we finally had a house we could move into. It was probably only, I don't really, we wouldn't spend $10,000 because I didn't have it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, $10,000 would have been a lot of money in those days.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No. There's one. When I mentioned I met my wife at Outboard Marine, we went together for a few years. And the Brock Arena in Peterborough used to have roller skating, ice skating, hockey games, and whatnot. And they also used to bring shows, radio shows. And they brought a radio show called Truth and Consequences. Roy Ward Dixon was the guy's name. And during the ceremony, he asked any couple that were thinking about being engaged, would they stand up? So we stood up, and he invited us up to the front and put us through a whole bunch of foolishness because you couldn't answer the question properly. That was the whole thing. I had to get put on long underwear and put my wife to be on my back and take her down the street and knock on doors and ask where the fire was. And what we didn't know, of course, is they sent a man along behind us just to see we didn't get in trouble. And then when we came back, I had Neil be, I don't know, 2,000 or so people there and proposed to her, and then the prize was an engagement ring.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, and my wife, excuse me, my wife never let me forget that I won that ring. So I had to, in later years, had to buy another one to replace it. Yeah.
That's a great story.
Do you still have the ring?
I really don't know what the heck happened to it.
Hey, Jack. Well, I guess what we'll do at this point in time, I'm sure there's many more things
Oh,
that
yeah.
you could talk about,
Yeah.
but I'm happy that we captured what we can today. I'd like to thank you on behalf of Lakefield Historical Society for taking the time to sit down with us. And I want to praise you and say that, your willingness to talk with us and provide this information for future generations is really invaluable. And so we're going to save this as part of our historical records. And I'm sure that future people are going to look back on this time and this time you spent with us and enjoy what you have to say and think fondly about who you are as a person, what
Right.
you accomplished in Lakeville, and what at your age you're still able to do.
Yep, yep. Yeah,
So thanks very much.